This is the Baunfire Gaming Podcast, episode 336. I am your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about a new Grand Theft Auto 6 trailer, Doom the Dark Ages reviews, BioWare hiring for Mass Effect, and much more. Okay, so this week I wanted to open it up with a discussion about Game of the Year and two things about it. I know it's a pointless, mostly toxic discussion, but I also like to have it. So even though I like to stay away from those kind of topics as much as I can, and I really do try to push away from the real clickbaity kind of thing, I think with Game of the Year, what I've tried to, or what I would like to get away from, is giving a crap what IGN names their Game of the Year, what Summer Game Fest, or not even Summer Game Fest, but Jeff Keighley's the Game Awards names their Game of the Year, or this outlet or that outlet, or this website or that website. I only really kind of care about mine, you know, and I say that in the context of like, I don't think that my Game of the Year is the Game of the Year, you know. I think my Game of the Year is my favorite game. And what I've often tried to do is name my like, 4 or 5 favorite games each year and kind of rank them for myself and give my opinions on them and why they worked for me and why they may not have worked for other people, all that. Like when Starfield was, I love Starfield. It's my Game of the Year that year. So cool. Still love it. Can't wait for more DLC. Still jump into it here and there. But it wasn't everyone's, and I understand that. I get why, to a point. There's also conversations to be had about games that I think get kind of done over, like I think last year Hellblade 2 was a game that really should have been considered, at least gotten more praise for its art and tech and voice acting and just everything about that game, which then you put all those things together and you're like, oh, this should have been, at least in the conversation, and it wasn't really, but lots of things around that. And I think those conversations are good to have. This year, Game of the Year so far has been really interesting. We're a third of the way through the year. We're in May, and there's already, like 4 games I think have a really, really good argument. And more really to other people. I think the kind of general 4 would be Expedition 33, especially Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I think that's a little bit more of a niche thing, especially when you talk about like the big award shows and stuff where like you're gonna have people in those IGNs and stuff. Like you'll have someone in the room being like, hey, Kingdom Come was amazing, and then you'll have the rest of people being like, oh yeah, I heard that, and then moving on, right? Blueprints, a game that I think is insanely overrated, but I get it. Like it's a cool game, don't get me wrong, it's one of my favorite games this year. I think someone spoiled the well on that game in a good way for the game. And I think someone, a notable games journalist, really gave that game like a one up bonus before it even came out, just off of hype. Which great, good for them, good for that dev. And I think it's like a single person. I could be wrong. And then Split Fiction, which like I think in other years, or if the game came out later this year, that game would like and should be in the conversation for Game of the Year. And I'm not gonna lie, even though there's games I have a much higher preference for this year to win, it would be like I would rather see Split Fiction win than like Death Stranding 2 or Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 or something. It's just that studio, Hazelight, is very unique, and it's the fact that even a few years ago, with their previous game, It Takes Two, I believe, they won it, and the game didn't have the best graphics that year. It didn't have the best story. It didn't have the best voice acting, or the best this, or the best that, but it was just the best game. And it seemed like that was pretty much inarguable. I didn't ever play it, but I watched full playthroughs of it, and like every few minutes, you were playing a different game. And it was a really good version of that game. And had a nice narrative around it. Like it was really funny. It was hilarious and kind of dark as well. And so I will say there's a big part of me that like if the game I want to win, which is probably Expedition 33, at least as of this point, if it can't win, I would want it to be Split Fiction. There are more games coming this year. We've got, like I said, Death Stranding 2 is coming, Ghost of Yotai, trying to stay away from the console worry stuff. Those two games are going to be PlayStation exclusives. Those games tend to get a bit of a boost, in my opinion, back when God of War beat out Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, I get it. That God of War, that kind of reimagining of it was really, really good and very cool, and people loved it. I don't think, maybe it's my own bias, you'll ever hear anyone say that the God of War, that kind of reimagining is one of the best games ever made. It's a very, very good game. It was one of the best games that year. But I don't think you'll get that conversation where, like, I think Red Dead Redemption 2 is, I would be willing to argue objectively, is one of the best games ever made. And it's just still in hindsight for me, like, like the Game Awards and some of the big award shows. I believe they traded a bit. I think both of them won some awards. But it's stuff like that where you have to kind of let it go. And it's why, like I said at the beginning, I think you can pay attention. The Game Awards is interesting to watch. I only really care about it to argue about who won Game of the Year and to see all the new trailers. But it has worth, I guess. But really, I think it's your own. And I feel like the conversation around that should be so much more about, what I like this year compared to other people. Like, oh, wow, that's in your top 5. That's crazy. I didn't even play that. Which nowadays it's so hard to play everything. So, Game of the Year, it's a fun conversation to have. It's an interesting thing to do, especially on the larger stage. But I really do implore people and myself, this is a message to me as well, to relax, just enjoy the ride, be happy there's so many great games to play, hope that the people who make them get treated better, and kind of try to not be pessimistic about that ever happening, and just roll with it and try to enjoy it a little bit. Let's jump into the rest of the show. Okay, let's jump into that gaming news. There's a lot of stuff this week, a lot of smaller topics, so we'll see how quickly get through all this. I'm going to indulge myself a little bit. I try to put the stories in order of how big of a deal they are, and we'll get there after the first story. But this first one, it's for me. I'm going to talk about Mass Effect. There was literally the tiniest amount of news this week. I also did put out a video of some kind of, I would argue it's like breaking news about the next game or about BioWare in general. Nothing huge, but we'll talk about it. So I'm going to lead off with that. We're probably even going to have a Mass Effect thumbnail this week because I don't care. I care a lot, but that's fine. Mass Effect project director and executive producer Mike Gamble puts out a call for devs to join BioWare to work on the next game. Now, when he posted this, if you don't know somehow, I really, really like Mass Effect. I'm a newer fan, though, as of the Legendary Edition back in 2021. That game and that release, that remaster, is what prompted me to change this podcast, which used to be called the Echo Cast, from the Division focused podcast to a general gaming podcast. And it's led to me focusing the most, I would say, in the last 4 years on Mass Effect. I still talk about the Division a bit. Obviously, I cover everything else as well. But it's been a big deal for me. And it's also been a fun conversation to have for the last 4 years because I'm a new fan. I've been aware of Mass Effect forever. In fact, I worked at least one of the game's midnight releases when I worked at GameStop, which is a fun story. But I have a different perspective on Mass Effect than a lot of OG fans do, for better or worse. And it's been a fun conversation to have for the last 4 years. And going back to my Division coverage, I really loved covering the Division 2 before it came out. Looking for all the little clues, any little hints, any leaks of info. And that really only lasted a year or two before that game came out. The Division 3 is so far away. There's nothing I think to get leaks on or anything. So Mass Effect has been fun to follow for me, especially the next game. It's been kind of frustrating or sad or upsetting because EA and BioWare are going through it. It has been interesting to be doing this while BioWare put out a different game. It was their first game they'd released in years, with Dragon Age: The Veilguard, a game I actually really enjoyed. I'm not a Dragon Age fan. I actively don't like Inquisition, and I think Origins and Dragon Age 2 they're just so old. There's no way I'd be able to enjoy them. I really struggle with high fantasy games in general, like caring about them. And then games with mechanics that dated, there's no way. I don't like the way Inquisition feels, and it's not even that old. So I'll spare myself that pain. But I really like the Veilguard. Not so much like, I'm not super invested in that world. I just thought they put out a really well made game. There's lots of issues around it. Even fans of the franchise and of BioWare didn't universally love it. I think I actually liked it more than many of them. But that's what's kind of led us to this spot. So I'm going to keep doing this. I have a whole other podcast. If you haven't ever heard it, it's called the Mass Effect Hypecast. I only do a couple episodes a year, at least for now. I'm sure that will pick up, hopefully, eventually. But every now and then I talk about it here as well. And this is one of those stories. So right now, BioWare is hiring a senior tech artist position. If you read through it, and after me kind of touching base with some other folks I interact with, I just assumed this was like someone who makes stuff in the game, not knowing that the senior tech artist, or at least the listing they have, is much more of like a liaison or like a manager. It's kind of hard to describe it, but it sounds like someone who kind of is like a go-between, but with a bunch of different teams who all kind of trying to help everyone bring this ship in together, right? So that makes sense that they'd be hiring for that. That's the only job currently. I anticipate this next Mass Effect going into full production in 2025. It's been in pre-production in some capacity back to 2019, really, or 2020. 2020 is when they officially announced it, and during the Game Awards actually showed the first trailer and the only real trailer for the next game. And even then, it was very just conceptual, I'm sure, and more of a teaser, a nostalgia bait piece than anything. There was technically a trailer in 2023 during their yearly celebration called N7 Day, which takes place on November 7th. But it was literally a 30-second trailer that shows essentially nothing, at least nothing we can decipher today. But I think it's interesting. I do think this game goes into full production this year. I suspect clues of that will include them jumping up their hiring quite a bit. If you haven't been paying attention, BioWare, after the Veilguard released last year, last fall, they at the time temporarily sent a bunch of the BioWare devs to other studios like EA Motive, who's working on Iron Man, Ripple Effect, who's working on Battlefield, as well as, I always forget what the studio is called, the Skate Studio, who's making that game. The initial impression was that they were going to those studios temporarily. And then at the beginning of 2025, a blog came out from Gary McKay, who's the head of BioWare, saying, by the way, we're kind of refocusing and we're just going to do one game at a time. They've always, in the history of their studio, worked on more than one game at a time. Most recently, just two at a time. But back in the day, they used to work on like 4 or 5 games at a time. This blog by Gary McKay said, hey, we're going to focus down. The next game is Mass Effect, and we're in pre-production on it still. We're getting that going. And, that unfortunately means we're laying people off, basically. It sounds like the vast majority of people had been placed in other jobs. I actually know and spoke to specifically a few people who went to BioWare to work on Mass Effect. Like, they literally applied for jobs for Mass Effect a few years ago and got hired for that, and now they're at other studios. So that obviously wasn't great. I'm under the impression most of these people were told, like, hey, you'll have an opportunity to come back to BioWare once we're ready, once full production begins. We'll see how that plays out. So that's been kind of rough because now BioWare was at one point fairly recently thought to be around 400 or 500 plus employees. They're likely closer to 100 or 200 now. which is still a full studio. Like I think sometimes people don't understand. Like you'll hear about like 1,000 people working on Call of Duty, or the way that like Ubisoft does their stuff, where they have like 8 different studios work on one game, and that totals hundreds of people. 1 or 200 people working on a game isn't that crazy, especially if there's a long-term plan to rebuild that team. Just recently, a former BioWare employee and developer, Mark Dara, who was near the top of the studio at one point and recently helped with the Dragon Age game, even said in it himself in the comments of a recent video about BioWare that it seems like they're rebuilding. Which, if you've seen Mark's videos or seen kind of his affect, you would know that really him giving any kind of hopeful spin on something is interesting, because he's very blunt. So I'm expecting to see a big hiring push this year as they approach kind of full production on that game. I assume a public call for hiring by the head of the next Mass Effect that's the first time I think they've ever done that. So this is also the first Mass Effect job they've posted in a couple of years, I think since 2023. More recent jobs they posted were specifically for Dragon Age and were like short-term contract jobs. So, something notable. I anticipate, I still think at this point, if you're a Mass Effect fan, you're looking for more info, I think we'll get some kind of blog or something this summer, and then likely a fairly substantial N7-day tease this year. If you aren't paying attention to this, in 2024, they basically didn't have N7-day. They put out a graphic with some text on it that was like, "Hey, thanks for being a fan. To shorten, we don't have much to show this year, but hang tight." And we found out later that was because the whole Mass Effect pre-production team, which we anticipate are 50 to 100 people, were all working on Dragon Age for like the year and a half before that. That Mass Effect hasn't been worked on, or had a like year and a half window where it made zero progress, or at least nothing substantial, because they were shipping another game. So they almost went to that model of one game only before they even talked about it, by a couple of years, actually. So I'm very curious to what happens. The most recent news I was able to find, I made a video about it last week, was Benoit Hole, who's a 19-year veteran of the studio, started work back when they were working on Mass Effect 1, but his first credit is for Mass Effect 2. He's been promoted to studio head of operations at BioWare. That's a fairly big deal. I'm trying to talk to some people who are kind of in the know about this stuff. They're saying that someone who's been there that long, going from, they helped on Dragon Age as, on production, like actually making the game, to a operations job at the studio. That's a big deal. I also talked about in my video I made how big of a deal it can be to have someone in a management position like that who did what you do, how big of a deal that is, even for my own job, where I work as my real job when I'm not making videos for 1 or 200 people to watch, which is plenty for me. I hope this is a good thing. I anticipate any movement at BioWare that isn't layoffs is a good thing. So everyone can have their own take on that. And there were layoffs just a couple weeks ago at EA. As far as I can tell, none of the people that either are still at BioWare or who were recently placed other places were affected. I did see that there are at least a handful of devs who were those devs who were at BioWare, got placed at other studios temporarily and then permanently, that some of them have moved on. There was one specifically that looks like they moved on to do the same job at Larian, Baldur's Gate 3 studio. So good for them. That is probably an upgrade, as much as I love BioWare and I wish the best for them. If I had to bet which studio is going to be around 10 years from now, I would say Larian is probably the higher chance there, though hopefully BioWare is as well, obviously. So lots of stuff there. This kind of gets into one of my own side obsessions. So if this was too boring, I apologize. But it's exciting. I'm hoping to see this play out. I don't want to see an IP like Mass Effect and a studio like BioWare go down the drain. So let's hope it doesn't. Moving on to more pertinent news, the Grand Theft Auto 6 trailer 2 has been revealed. This comes on the heels of them announcing that the game's coming out next year, about a year from now, next May. and that's cool. This trailer is insane, and their trailers always are, right? Like a Rockstar trailer is always going to be good. It's always going to have good music. It's always going to be compelling. It's always going to show off things that you will eventually see in the game. I feel like most of their trailers do tend to be pretty representative of the game they will release. This one features Jason and Lucia, who are the two main protagonists. They are a couple. It seems like they're setting up that Jason's just a dude who lives in Florida. It seems like they're in a previous relationship. She gets out of jail. They get back together and start heisting and doing all their criminal activities. Um, it's it's just the trailer's insane. It's so good that everyone is so hot in this. They're making, all the people hot who are supposed to be hot, all the people weird and grotesque who are supposed to be weird and grotesque. But they, especially the two main characters here, made sure to make them extra thirsty looking. It'll be interesting to see how adult themed this game is. I anticipate it being extremely adult themed, as the previous games have been in their own way, but this one maybe even more so. So we'll have to wait and see. It's been really funny. There's been some weird reactions to this. Of like one of them was because the main character or one of them isn't white. There are people being like, "Oh, Rockstar's woke." It's like, oh man, this is gonna be like the most like heterosexually coded game it's ever made. Like they'll include, like they are inclusive, like they're an inclusive company. They'll give other, types of people their fair share, both good and bad, I'm sure. Um my favorite reaction to this was some people getting on the train and being like, "Oh, Grand Theft Auto is anti-police." It's like, whoa, talk about a complete misunderstanding of what this franchise has always been about. That's always been dogging on cops. That's always been really, kind of satirical about violence on police and law enforcement and all that. Not to mention that if you watch this trailer, the main character Jason, the male, is the most undercover cop coded character I've ever seen. If we play this game and by the end we don't find out that he was an undercover cop the whole time, or he got flipped or something and he's working for the police or the FBI or something, if that doesn't happen, I'll be amazed, because even from the very little footage we've seen, these trailers, he's got to be a cop. Like it's just one of those things where maybe they're intentionally trying to clue us into that. Maybe was it Lucia, I believe, will end up being the cop or something. We'll have to wait and find out, I guess. But yeah, that reaction was funny. So that trailer just on YouTube has almost 100 million views in just a couple days. Like this game, like when it comes out next year, is gonna sell. It's gonna be hilarious. Like it's gonna be very funny how many copies this game sells. Like in the first 24 hours, it's gonna be insane. Because I believe Grand Theft Auto 5, which has been out for like over a decade now, I want to say it's like over 100 million copies sold or something, maybe 50 million. Whatever the number is, it's so many that it's unbelievable. I think the only game that's sold more than it is like Tetris and maybe Minecraft or something. It's crazy. So the last bit that was cool, the trailer they showed, which looked insane, it was mostly cinematics. They said it was 50-50, like captured gameplay and captured cinematics. So it's kind of hard to pick out which is which, even though I'm sure it's mostly like B-roll. That was probably gameplay or in-game footage. It was all captured on base PS5. So they didn't use PC to capture. They didn't even use a PS5 Pro to capture. It was all PS5 base. We'll see how this plays out. Supposedly this game's going to be on Series S as well, which is just insane, because I don't see how this game is anything more than like 900p or 1080p 30 FPS on the Series X and PS5. I can't even imagine the magic they're going to have to do for the Series S. And then we'll probably see some kind of performance mode on the PS5 Pro. The thing is that I've seen a lot of people being like, "Oh, PS5 Pro is going to be the best way to play this because it's not coming to PC, at least not for a while." It's worth considering that yes, the PS5 Pro will likely be the best place to play this if you want anything even sniffing 60 FPS at any resolution. It's worth remembering that there's a really, really good chance that in 2026, more likely 27, Xbox is likely releasing their new console. And PlayStation will have the jump early for sure when it comes to that. But it may not be as long lived as people think. And honestly, the PS6 is probably not as far away as you think either. So we'll have to wait and see about that. I thought that Grand Theft Auto trailer looked awesome, and yeah, I'm excited to play it when it comes out a year from now. In the meantime, everyone's going to be announcing their games for the rest of 2025 and maybe early 26, and then you're gonna see like a big like month gap on each side of Grand Theft Auto that you probably won't see any like huge releases, but we'll have to wait and see. But I do think Devolver, the publisher, has claimed that they're going to release a game on the same day, just in opposition. Okay, do whatever you do to get attention. I guess that's what they always do. Next story is Doom: The Dark Ages. The review embargo is up, and those reviews are out. It has an open critic score currently of 86. I anticipate it'll hang around there. Might go up a point or two. We'll have to wait and see. But I watched a couple of reviews this morning. I did apply for a code to test this or to review it. I didn't get it, unfortunately. It seems like if you like Doom, it's a great Doom game. They talked a lot about how the 2016 Doom kind of reimagining or whatever they did was, you were like a Mack truck, and then in the more recent game, Eternal, you were more like a fighter jet. Like it was very high mobility, stuff like that. They've compared this new game to being like a tank, and the reviews I saw, corroborated that between your shield and the more damaging weapons and the changes they've made to like the finisher kills and all that this game, you feel powerful, you feel plodding, even though there is sprinting in it, and the movement is fairly quick. But I guess just the environmental variety, the enemy variety, the actual gameplay, and the feel of everything is just masterful. I'm surprised this only has an 86, honestly, because at least the reviews I've seen so far were very glowing, like even more than 86, which is still very good. I'm assuming there must have been some people who weren't as impressed and are kind of dragging that score down. But 86 or anything in the mid high 80s is nothing to complain about, really anything in the 80s at all. This only continues to reinforce how insanely good Game Pass has been in 2025 in the last year. Honestly, in the last 3 or 4 years, I suspect if I would calculate the number of hours I've played and the number of games I've played since I got Game Pass a few years ago, there's just no way that I'm not way ahead on money. When it comes to, games like Starfield and stuff that I've played hundreds of hours of, or, games like this where like I would have paid $70 for it, but instead I didn't. And I'm going to play it. South of Midnight, Expedition 33, like all these games over the last few years, a couple years ago, Plague Tale Requiem, like a game I would have never purchased, but I played it day one on Game Pass and it was my game of the year that year. I'm pretty sure. So, it's this Doom: The Dark Ages looks like it's awesome. Another great entry by the team over at id. The engine looks great. I'm seeing people being very big about how there's like no bugs, that it runs extremely well even on the Series S, that it's just a great experience overall. They just keep making Game Pass more worth it, and they keep making that conversation about their console sales not being great, and they jumped the prices on them recently. About stuff like that, it kind of becomes irrelevant when you see how much money they're pulling in. I saw someone make a point, today on Threads, I think, of like, oh, one thing you never see about the conversation about how much money Xbox is making is how much they spent on ABK. Like, yeah, they spent like $75 billion. It's going to take years and years and years to recoup that money, but they will. And it'll pay off big time. And what I think a lot of people don't realize, like that person who made that comment, is, at least from my impression, is that the way corporations work is like that wasn't them just paying money for a thing. It was an investment. So they know that is going to take time to pay off. What they care about is that they acquired a thing and now that thing is making them tons of money. And even if they're still in the red for a few years, they don't care because they don't like, I feel like consumers like me and like anyone who listens to this are very focused on the next, week or the next month or the next year. And that's because in our day-to-day lives, I assume the average person who listens to this is, if they're not living paycheck to paycheck, they're living, maybe month to month, right? And so that's how we have to think, right? These corporations like Microsoft and stuff, when they acquired Activision Blizzard King, they were probably doing projections on the income that they're going to make from that. And today they probably still are 10 years, 20 years from now. Like we, as these little finite human beings, just have a different perspective, right? Like these big giant corporations, they're these monoliths, they're these monstrosities. They aren't, even though the US government says they aren't people. And while they can die and they can go away and they can fail and they can disappear, they don't, not very many, a lot of them stick around. And things like Microsoft and Google and all these companies, Microsoft probably has a long lifespan ahead of it unless things go really bad. And so, this conversation that goes around of like, like right now, Xbox is the biggest publisher in the world, money wise. The last report I saw is the top 3 games sold in April on PlayStation were published by Xbox. Like that's crazy. Like that's insane. Now, there's a whole different conversation to be had about Sony putting out like no games for the last 3 years. It's insane to me that it's a conversation that isn't bigger, because if the roles were reversed, this is my console war side coming out. If Xbox had the production, had the number of releases, first party, not the third party paid exclusive stuff. If Xbox had the first party release schedule of PlayStation for the last 3 years, it would, the doomerism talk would be insane. But instead, they've been releasing like new games every month, or at least every couple months, and they've mostly been really good. The only complete failure has been Redfall. As much as people want to paint Starfield as a failure, it's not. It's a really, really good game. It just wasn't the revolution people hoped it would be. It was more Bethesda game. It was more Fallout, right? But that's still really good. Like it's still better than most games, right? So yeah, Dune: The Dark Ages, open critic score of 86, seems like it's doing really well. Another great addition to Xbox's lineup, to Game Pass, and if you're on PlayStation and you want to play it, Xbox will happily take your $70 or whatever. So cool. Death Stranding 2 previews are out. Sounds like it's basically Death Stranding 1, but with more action. The most I heard from this was from Blessing Adeoye Jr. over at Kind of Funny, though I've seen some other previews as well. He claims that he played 30 plus hours of this during a trip to Japan a few weeks ago where he met Kojima. They did like a big group interview with him. Yeah, I mean, and they showed a bunch of footage yesterday as well when the embargo on this preview was up. And it literally, what's funny about it is I know that towards the end of Death Stranding, it becomes more action oriented. And it seems like with 2, they kind of got the message from people being like, okay, people just want to do that from the start. And my guess is it's just going to be a more action packed game in general. I've tried to play it. It actually came out on Xbox not long ago. The theory is that Kojima retains the rights to all of his games. And with like Death Stranding 1, he had a 5-year deal because it's been 5 years, I believe, since the first one came out. And it just recently popped up on Xbox. It's cool. Like it's pretty and it feels nice to play. And it's, it's a Kojima game, right? Like if you play Metal Gear Solid 5 or any of the other ones, it's got that feel to it. But man, it was mind-numbingly boring. And like Kojima's really kind of crafted this like auteur status over the last, so many years of like, he wants to do movies and he pals around with all these artists and these actors and musicians and all this stuff. And he's kind of like created this legend around himself. And like, I get it. Like he is one of, the most known gaming figures ever. And he's made, the Metal Gear series itself, if you've played them, is legendary in its own way. I will say it's gotten very like pretentious and kind of cringy to me. It really makes me think back to his whole saga with Konami and how like with Metal Gear Solid 5, they had such differences that, they basically didn't finish the game and they just kind of pushed out what was done. And to this day, if you go play Metal Gear Solid 5, like it technically ends. There is technically a resolution to the story, but it very clearly wasn't the way it was meant to end, and it was cut off short. And ever since then, like I lost a lot of respect for everyone really in that situation. And then the way he's, kind of did his own studio, cozied up to Sony real big, with Death Stranding 1, because like Death Stranding 1 uses and 2 both use the same engine as Horizon Zero Dawn, in the newer games as well, which was kind of wild because I think that means that that was the first time that engine had been played on Xbox when they did the Death Stranding 1 there, which is kind of neat. But I just, I don't know. Like I'm a little disillusioned by it. Like I'm sure Death Stranding 2 is going to be amazing. It will get good reviews, guaranteed. I'm sure the majority of those reviews will be very well justified by the actual game, but it's just a simple fact that it being a PlayStation exclusive, at least for now, Kojima's status amongst the people who tend to do these things, it's gonna probably get maybe 4 or 5 points of Metacritic score that maybe it wouldn't get without him on it, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, it's an interesting thing. So it's also implied that this game could be, I believe the first game was around 25 or 30 hours of gameplay. This new one, people did 30 hours of preview and didn't believe they were even halfway done with the game. So whew, that's a long game, man. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm very curious. Oh, and Kojima said that he has an idea for Death Stranding 3, but doesn't know if he'll be able to do it because he's got OD, which is the game that will be on Xbox. I don't know if it's necessarily an exclusive. Those details have been kind of mushy right now because we haven't even seen the game yet. But that he is making a game that will be on Xbox currently, and then I believe he also has a project planned, another game. So there's a really, really good chance, and he's in his 60s already, that if it takes 10 plus years to put these next two games out, he may be done. He may be retired, man. Like it's weird that I'm getting old enough that the legendary gaming figures that I know of are going to start going away one way or the other in the next, 10, 15 years. So, oh God, aging. Moving on to the Xbox ASUS handheld, possibly leaked. So this is some pictures that came, I believe, from like an FCC filing. Um, it looks like, so ASUS is putting out ASUS. I don't know. They have an Ally, and it's this really powerful handheld PC that people are pretty high on. They have an Ally 2 coming out, and what's interesting about that is that they have two versions of it. One is going to be the ASUS Ally 2, and it's just going to be the next iteration of them, it sounds like. But then there's also going to be an Xbox version. So this is not the Xbox in-house hardware handheld that is rumored. That's not rumored to come out until after the next Xbox, like desktop console. This is a partnership with ASUS to make basically an Ally 2 that has some extra stuff to make it, more compatible with Xbox. So from these pictures we saw, there's like dedicated buttons just for Xbox stuff. And the rumor is, or the hope is that, and due to a bunch of updates to the Xbox app recently, they believe it's going to have some ability to either use like the Xbox OS or to at least have integrations into the system that make it way easier to access Xbox games, the Xbox PC app, and Game Pass. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I'm going to be honest, like the fact that these handhelds, for them to be useful, they just have to be $500 or $600, if not more. And I don't know. I'm not doing that. Like it's a cool idea, but even the Switch 2 being $450 now and likely more due to tariffs soon, I can't do it. So for people who want that mobile experience, the Ally, I believe, can also hook up to a screen. So in theory, if these new pieces of hardware are fast enough, you could use it as a desktop as well. That's super cool. Not really my alley, but I'm happy for everyone who wants that. PlayStation has announced a new studio, LFG, that was previously within Bungie and is now working on a social MOBA. So PlayStation is continuing to go down this path of trying to do the live service game, multiplayer game thing. I mean, it has always been one of their weaknesses. They've never been good at doing that stuff. But the way that it seems like they've taken resources, away from their best studios and their best franchises to go whole hog into this live service push for the last like 3 or 4 years now. I mean, you look at their release cadence of first party games, it's hurting them. Now, they've sold 70 million PlayStation 5s or whatever. And even though that doesn't make them really much money, it's still a big conversation point. They still have put out some good games. Like, inarguably, Astrobot last year was game of the year for many. And, even though it was kind of a small experience, still. But there is like this underlying kind of weirdness about like, man, PlayStation has shut down a lot of studios and canceled a lot of games. And it looks like it's all been around this issue with their live service push. And now they have a whole new studio. The studio thing is funny. So the LFG is looking for group. But to a lot of people, LFG, whether it's because of Tom Brady, the football player, or whatever, it's let's effing go. And they were like very ambivalent to that being what some people thought it stood for. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what PlayStation is doing. I know that, the media isn't holding them to any account. Doesn't seem to be ringing any alarm bells. So I don't know. I don't know. It's strange that everything they're doing is strange to me, but they must not be too worried about it yet. We'll see what happens in the next couple years. The Palworld devs state that they have removed various features from the game due to a Nintendo lawsuit, including flying on or like gliding with your pals, which are like their version of Pokemon, as well as deploying a pal that you have using a ball. Now they just appear. You used to throw a ball and they would pop up. This is one of those funny stories because Nintendo has done such an insane job of controlling the conversation around them, where they keep releasing these consoles that are literally multiple generations behind the other platforms. They release games that, while good games technically, look awful, run awful. They have all these terrible systems for the online system, for how you do various things on their platform. It's just a complete mess. They're borderline incompetent with a lot of these things, and they are the most litigious platform, and you can't do anything with anything. And to this point, they managed to force another company to take away a really basic game mechanic just because it was similar to something that they did. The whole thing about Palworld just being a copy of Pokemon, which it's obviously a heavy reference to it. If you've actually played Palworld, it's just like a survival game that happens to have some like Pokemon-ish mechanics in it. But at the end of the day, it's a survival game where you collect materials, you build stuff, you upgrade things, like, and then you enslave these pals. It's super. I played it for quite a bit. I definitely got over it pretty quickly as well. But I think it's so wild that Nintendo is like arguably kind of evil. And you'll just never hear anyone talk about it because of various reasons. So is what it is, I guess. Gears of War Reloaded has been announced for all platforms. This is a Gears of War 1 remaster, and it will be released on PlayStation. This has led to another one of those blow-ups of PlayStation fans being like, oh, why would I even need an Xbox? My PlayStation's an Xbox. And then, weird Xbox fans who I don't even believe are really fans being like, oh, I give up. I'm selling my Xbox. I'm buying. Okay. Like, I don't know. I don't care what you do with your systems. And I think eventually people are going to realize that Xbox making these choices means that they don't care either. They are just happy to take your money. At the end of the day, the way I take it, and it's what I kind of said before about Doom, buy it on PlayStation for $70. That's awesome. because all that's doing for me is paying, it's making sure that my Game Pass stays alive. It's hopefully means that the next Xbox will still be subsidized. Cool, play their games on other platforms. Literally doesn't bother me at all, especially as they expand like crossplay with multiplayer and stuff. Like, okay, buy Doom on PlayStation. I literally don't care at all, and I think Xbox cares even less. So, uh, cool. Gears. I've never been a Gears guy. I am curious about a remaster of the first game. Obviously, this is a lead up to E-Day, the new game coming out, I assume in the next couple of years. I am surprised that this remaster doesn't have 2 and 3. The rumors for months or years now was that it was going to be a trilogy remaster. From what we've seen so far, it looks like a pretty substantial upgrade. So this may be one of those games that kind of borders on remaster or remake. And I just assume that either because of time or resources or just scope, they decided just to do the one game. They will certainly release, remaster 2 and 3 eventually, but we'll have to wait and see. Having them do one makes sense because the next Gears game, the next new one, will be a prequel to one. So it kind of makes sense that they want a modern version of Gears of War 1 for people who play E-Day to be able to go on and play the, oh wow, what happens next? And to play a modern version of it. And then by the time that all happens, I wouldn't be surprised if 2 and 3 have their remasters as well. So it makes sense what they're doing. Tim Sweeney, head of Epic, states that Unreal Engine 6 is 2 to 3 years away from pre-release builds. If you're someone who pays attention to game dev or follows game developers and stuff a lot, this like made me like pucker up because it seems like studios and developers are just now getting their hands around and figuring out Unreal Engine 5. And so the idea that a new engine version is coming in just a couple of years is terrifying. I will say from reading through more of it, it sounds like, and I didn't know this, Fortnite is basically just an advertising platform for Unreal. It's basically showing people like, hey, look what Unreal can do. And it obviously brings in a ton of revenue as well. It sounds like from what I read that this Unreal Engine 6 will be more trying to combine things from the Fortnite version of Unreal in the base version, which I didn't know there was a difference. So it almost sounds like the 6 isn't going to be a true like next generation of Unreal. It's going to be more of like just trying to kind of bring the various development lanes into one. I don't know. I don't know enough about this to speak too positively on it, but I just thought it was interesting after seeing. I think developers finally, taking in Unreal Engine 5 just to see Unreal Engine 6 even mentioned was like a shock. The FTC case against Xbox's acquisition of Activision Blizzard King is officially over, even though it's been effectively over for a couple of years now. The case was still technically in the courts, and it's now been dismissed. They did not get a finding. The FTC did not get what they wanted to try to block that deal, and we'll see how that plays out in the long run. We'll see. I think it's going well so far, but things change. You never know what world situations can do to stuff like this. EA has reaffirmed their plans to release the next Battlefield game in fiscal year 2026. So their fiscal year goes from, I believe it's May of a year through April of the next. Or no, it's April through March. That's what it is. So that means that the next Battlefield should be expected before April of 2026. I think they've already affirmed that, but this was kind of reiterated this week. We've gotten some more of their testing, both leaks of footage, leaks, quote unquote. I don't think they're punishing people for posting these leaks, if you want me to be honest. As well as they've been doing pretty consistent blogs about what they're working on, what the next tests are going to do, adding more people. I'm hoping to get picked eventually. And I'm super excited for this. I've liked basically every Battlefield game. I love 2042, even though a lot of people didn't like it. But from what they've shown so far about this next one, it's much more in line with what I actually want from a Battlefield game. And I'm really excited to see that, whether it's to test it or when it comes out. My guess is that Battlefield comes out this fall. I don't think they're going to wait till next year. I think this will be a fall game. It's just they got to stay away from Call of Duty, man. I know they're very different games. I don't think they compete as head on head as people think they do, but they probably still compete enough head on head that you probably don't want to be putting them out like in the same month. But we'll have to wait and see. Personally, I'd rather play Battlefield the rest of my life than ever play another Call of Duty. I get they're very different games. Like I think I understand why some people would prefer one over the other. For me, it's not even close. It's Battlefield by a long mile. Sandfall Interactive, the developers of Claire Obscure Expedition 33, have cleared up some conversation around DLC, where I think on Discord or something, one of their devs said that it's likely they'll get DLC. They have cleared up and said that they have no current plans to do DLC for the game. It sounds like from some of the quotes I saw, they feel completely empty and exhausted from the development of that game. So something tells me they're taking a break for a little bit. I could see DLC for the game. I would honestly rather see them just work on their next project. There's definitely room for a sequel to Expedition 33. It would be interesting how they would do it, but I could see it. Or they may just try something new. So we'll have to wait and see what they do. They also had their first bit of controversy. There was a build you can make with a specific sword with one of the main characters, where it basically broke the game. Like you couldn't be killed because of it, and so they're balancing it to take that away because it was unintended to be played like that. A bunch of people threw up their hands. Oh, it's just a single player game. Who cares? Blah blah blah. Look, it's their game. They can do what they want, and if people are breaking it in a way that wasn't meant to be broken, I think it's perfectly fine for them to make some adjustments there. Fallout Season 2, the Amazon Prime show, has finished filming and is expected in 2026. So from the teases at the end of the first series, the first season, it implies that this is going to be going to New Vegas. So I'm really excited about that because it's probably not going to be the New Vegas from the game. It's probably going to be a post-game New Vegas. And it'll be really cool to see how they handle that. I still think that first season of the Fallout show is the best adaptation of a video game thing ever. It tells its own story. It has its own characters with some references to characters we knew. But it understood that world and the feel of that world through the game so well that I'm extremely excited for this second season. And then finally, the Division 2 removed the ability to pay for season pass progression due to people abusing the system to get exotic gear. I got to talk about Division 2 as often as I can. Unfortunately, it's often not great news, and this is one of those. I don't know what they were thinking. They've done this stuff before. Sometimes I feel like these guys have the memory of goldfish, but I also know they're doing their best, and they're trying to just keep that game going. All the power to them. Good luck. Okay, moving on to some content updates. We have some upcoming game showcases. Summer Game Fest and the Xbox Showcase are already announced at the very beginning of June. I do plan to be able to live stream those, to co-stream them. So be on the lookout for all of that when it happens. Come and hang out. I would love to have some people to watch with. I did just finish my Mass Effect 2 modded playthrough. The VODs are all on YouTube now, so if you want to check that out, you can. And I started on my Mass Effect 3 playthrough for mods. I'm mostly doing this so I can update my mod video on YouTube, which is my most watched video, or at least my most watched recent video. So I'm excited to do that. I love making those little guides like that, even though it's not really what I do. And then that's kind of what I got for updates. It's going to be this month will start getting busy for me again, or at least my time will be more limited because the family will be around the house a bit more this summer. But we'll figure it out. We always do. And I plan on continuing this podcast, doing the Mass Effect Hypecast whenever there's something to talk about. And I've been trying to get my Twitch going again a little more often. YouTube, I've been posting pretty consistently. Twitch, not so much, even though I did stream on there, like 4 times this week, probably another time tomorrow on Saturday. I'm recording this on Friday. I have had a couple streams without anyone saying anything the entire couple hours. So please stop by my stream, at least lurk. I appreciate that at the very least. But, say hi, if you have any questions or thoughts on the podcast or anything else, I'm happy to hear it and give my takes on it. But for the love of God, please come hang out in my stream. And that's where we're going to wrap this thing up. So thank you so much for listening or watching, listening to or watching this episode. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, and subscribe to the Bond Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as a YouTube member or Twitch subscriber. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, check out the links in the show description. If you have any questions or feedback, comment on Spotify or YouTube. Let me know on my Discord or hit me up on social media at Baunfire or at the Baunfire. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.